Welcome to Module 1, Part 3. This module, Part 3, is about the development of the Edgewalker questionnaire. This is especially interesting to those who are assessment geeks, and I still want to explain things in a simple enough way that any layperson could understand it. So I'm happy to be sharing this with you today. So let's get on to sharing the PowerPoint. So in this, the third of 7 parts of Module 1, we're going to be looking at the following topics. First of all, I want to share with you my philosophy of assessments and explain why I think they're useful, but why they're not the truth. Secondly, we'll look at how the Edgewalker profile was developed, the item construction and so forth. And third, we'll look at how it was tested. Did a lot of work with Linda Hoops, my partner in this work, and she's really the statistics guru on this. So if there's ever any questions where we want to go deeper, we can involve Linda and get her input. And then finally, just a little bit about how the profile is scored. So let's move on. So my philosophy of assessments is, first of all, that any assessment is not the truth. It is not the truth about you. It is not the truth about any client that you're working in with. We're far too complex, and we're not staying the same all the time. We're not static beings. We're always changing and hopefully growing. So it is not the truth, but what's value is an opportunity for a meaningful conversation about ideas you may not have thought of before, ways to get more of a finer point on who you are and what strengths you have to bring the world. A very basic principle is you and your clients, they're the judge of whether something is true or not, especially in these reports. And that would be one of the first questions when coaching someone, is what stands out for you as really true and really in alignment with who you are, and what do you feel really does not hit the mark with who you are or raises some kind of resistance or feelings of discomfort that we can talk about and explore. And the final point is that assessment conversations and coaching sessions around assessments are really only useful if actions are identified, and then there's support and commitment for the client to be able to take actions that they find meaningful. And so in the Edgewalker report, there is the final page where people can identify 3 concrete actions with due dates that move them towards being more of who they really want to be. So here's how the items were developed. First of all, in the Edgewalker book, if you go to page 24, there's what's called the Edgewalker quiz. And in that quiz are 20 items that I just made up based on people I had interviewed who I really identified as being Edgewalkers, and looked for, in those interviews, what were some of the patterns and themes they talked about on how they walked between worlds and built bridges between different worldviews. So I started using that in workshops and used it again as a way to have a conversation about something that people might not have thought of before. And so it was useful for that, but not scientific and not valid. It really is just something simply made up. But I began there when I wanted to create the scientific and valid and reliable questionnaire. I started with those 20 items and then looked at the definitions that I had written in the Edgewalker book for the 5 qualities and the 5 skills. And then the things that I had described in those paragraphs following the definitions. So I took all of that material and out of that developed 10 items for every skill. So there's 5 skills, that would be 50 items for the Edgewalker skills, and then 10 items for each of the 5 qualities, another 50 items. So that created a 100-item questionnaire. And when you're developing a questionnaire, one of the ideas is to have more questions than you would ever really want to use in a practical and applied questionnaire, but you start big and then you narrow it down. So out of those 100 items, 24 items were listed to describe the opposite of the intended constructor idea. The reason you do that is to get rid of some of the positive bias that people have, where they want to always respond to a question with kind of a yes, yes, I'm like that. But you do these oppositely worded items to help it be more valid. So in the first testing round, we had 69 participants, and they took the 100-item questionnaire, and we asked them to write comments about questions that weren't clear, questions that were too complex, and items that just didn't seem to fit anything that they could respond to. So that helped us to flag the items and take out items that really just weren't going to work. And then Linda did the descriptive statistics, and she did all the analysis about looking at where there was low variance or too high of a mean or too low of a mean. And after she did that, she and I sat down. I remember in her office in Atlanta, we sat on the floor with all these papers spread around, with looking at all the different questions and what we were keeping, and whether or not there was some pattern to the response. And so we did a factor analysis. And again, Linda ran the statistics, but we talked about the factor analysis. Then we eliminated items that just didn't group or fit the way that our thinking about the Edgewalker model fit. So I kind of got rid of the outliers. Next, then she ran an internal consistency reliable analysis called Cronbach's Alpha, and again removed any items that did not contribute to an internal consistency. So we looked at it both statistically and theoretically, as we wanted to get down to half the items that we had. So we're able to reduce it to a 50-item questionnaire, and that means that there's 5 items for each quality and 5 items for each skill. We then took that revised questionnaire and tested it with Retreat that Patricia Campanile and I ran in Connecticut at a women's retreat. And so we gave them the questionnaire. We also, we did several different places. Gave it to a top leadership team at a project management firm in Puerto Rico, and to the top leadership of a Catholic hospital in the southern part of the US. So when we did that, we tested again, and we found that it is quite a valid and reliable instrument. There is an issue with high intercorrelations between some of the items, meaning that some items in the qualities might correlate with some items in the skills, and that it's a little bit hard to distinguish between them. But in fact, there is theoretically that kind of intercorrelation in some of the items, like vision and knowing the future, for example. So vision is a quality and knowing the future is a skill, and there's a similarity between them. They may not be the exact same thing, but they're intercorrelated. Next, then we tested it with an instrument that Linda Hoops herself had developed called the Personal Resilience Profile. And that's a research tool and used in corporations that measures individual resilience to change. How well do you bounce back when there's a planned or unplanned change? How well do you get on your feet again and get productive? And she had 7 items in her questionnaire, seven constructs. And so we found that there was a high correlation with some of the items, and that actually substantiates our theory about edgewalkers in the way they respond to change, and people with high personal resilience, how they respond to change. So that really helps us to know that we're measuring what we think we're measuring, which is one way to test validity of an instrument. The research that we did on comparing the Edgewalker profile and the personal resilience profile is in an article, a chapter in a book I wrote that Linda and I co-wrote together, and it is in your Module 1 file. So if you really want to get into the statistics of it all, that is a resource for you. So now let's look at the Edgewalker profile scoring, and the scores range on each item from 5 to 35. That means the lowest anybody can score on any particular question in the questionnaire is 5. The highest, perfect score, meaning, yes, this is very much like me. I said yes to every single one of these items. That would be a 35. And in the bar graphs in the report, that's really the one that right at the top line. So the scores are individual scores for the 5 qualities and the 5 skills. So the graph has 10 different bars, 5 for the qualities and 5 for the skills. So what this describes, this report and these charts, they describe a person's ability to respond in innovative ways when things are unpredictable, I'm sorry. And that's what we talked about in a previous module about the unpredictability of today's world. And this is really looking at Edgewalkers who can respond to change in healthy ways and lead change in healthy ways. So the higher your scores are, the more you're able to be resilient to change, be the leader of change, and have an inner sense of growth for your own personal change that you want to create for yourself. This questionnaire is designed for both personal and professional development, but more of an emphasis on professional development and on leadership development. When people take the questionnaire, the scores, the reports are only sent to them and to their coach. If it's done in a corporation, the scores are not sent to anybody within the corporation unless they're a certified Edgewalker facilitator. So those scores are confidential, and that's important, particularly in a corporate setting and if you're offering this to a corporate client. So let me ask you if you have any questions, and if you do, please send them to your instructor and to the entire cohort. Unless that question is a personal question, then of course you just send it to the instructor. And realize that unless it's a personal question, everybody can benefit from these questions and answers. We are a learning cohort, we are a learning community, so we learn together. One of the things I love about doing these programs is I always learn from your questions and from your challenges. Often there are things that people in these programs think about that I never thought about. And so I look forward to that learning. So your next step now is to go on to Module 1, Part 4. And Part 4 goes into a little bit more detail about the Edgewalker qualities as they're measured by the Edgewalker profile. And there's a tool built into the PowerPoint that I'll explain to you in that next module so that you can use that tool in your work with a client. Thank you. See you in next module.